this is Dr. Jessica Fusch, your host for the Biohack Your Pets podcast. I'm also a holistic veterinarian, biohacker myself, and animal wellness pioneer. I am on a mission to maximize your pet's health and longevity. On this podcast, we will hear from leading experts about ancient techniques and therapies, as well as cutting-edge ones too. I know the questions to ask, so let's dig deep and change our approach from one that is reactive, where we wait to treat disease, to one that is proactive, where we are intentionally creating wellness.
Hello, Biohack Your Pet Podcast listeners. Today we have another bite-sized nutrition lesson from Dr. Jessica Fusch, moi, your host. I would like to talk to you about fat-soluble vitamins because these vitamins are some of the nutrients that you actually do need to worry about giving in excess when you're creating a raw or home-cooked dog food or cat food. We're talking about dogs specifically on these numbers today, however. So vitamin D is a very important nutrient. It's a fat-soluble vitamin. It does have a minimum and a maximum, and the range is not that big for this particular nutrient, so I focus a lot on this one when I'm creating diets. Vitamin D's minimum is 14 international units per 100 kilocalories, and the maximum is 143 international units per 100 kilocalories. So for my 50-pound dog who needs about 1,000 kilocalories just for the ease of math. Of course, she gets some treats, so she gets a little bit extra. Her real caloric needs are about 1,200 kilocalories, but 1,000 kilocalories makes it pretty easy, right? So 14 times 10 is 140 international units. That's her minimum amount of vitamin D that she will need. And the maximum is going to be about 612. Yes, 612 international units. Doing math in my head is going to be her maximum for her 1,000 kilocal daily requirements. Okay, that's actually not that much. 612. That's really easy to get to that point. It's actually, if you gave a whole teaspoon of Carlson's, you would have 400 international units. So she could have a whole teaspoon a day. That would still be in her range. Now, if you're feeding organ meats like liver, you may get some vitamin D from that too. So most of the diets that I prepare do not require a full teaspoon of the Carlson's. I actually give her about a quarter of a teaspoon in most of the diets. Then that gets her into that perfect healthy range without going near the maximum dose of vitamin D. Okay, vitamin A is the thing we need to talk about next because we need to make sure that the vitamin D to vitamin A ratio is correct. We want the vitamin D to vitamin A ratio to be about 1 to 10. However, you don't really want to get to that maximum dose. The maximum dose of vitamin A is 7,143 international units per 100 kilocalories. And a lot of cod liver oils, that's what we use. That's what I like to use to get the vitamin D right. A lot of cod liver oils may actually have 5,000 units of vitamin A per teaspoon. So you're still not going to get to that maximum dose because 7,143 international units per 100 kilocalories is 70,000 international units, which is going to be really high. That's really, really difficult to get to. And dogs do not absorb the plant forms of vitamin A like beta carotene that you're going to get from carrots and sweet potatoes, as well as they absorb the types of vitamin A that are going to be in, say, beef liver. That is going to have some vitamin A. And so that's why I don't want to use the cod liver oils that have higher doses of vitamin A, because the Carlson's has only 1,250 international units per teaspoon, which is a lot lower than a lot of the other ones. So you're going to stay into that really nice medium range. You're going to be over your minimum, which is 143 international units per 100 kilocalories, but you're going to be way under that maximum dose. So there's a really good balance in there, and you don't really have to worry about it. I feel like as long as you're using the Carlsons, as long as you make sure you have the appropriate amount of vitamin D, your vitamin A is just going to fall right into line. Vitamin E is another fat-soluble vitamin that is very, very important. They need 1.4 international units per 100 kilocalories as a minimum. The maximum is 28.6 international units per 100 kilocalories, and that's actually really hard to get to. So let's talk about using the Carlsons cod liver oil again. It has 10 international units of vitamin E per teaspoon. Now again, remember, I'm only utilizing about a quarter of a teaspoon a day. So a quarter of that is 2.5. And my dog will need about 14 international units of vitamin E as a minimum. So 2.5 is not quite going to get it. So things that we can use to get the vitamin E levels higher are safflower oil, wheat germ oil, sunflower seeds, almonds, peanut butter, greens, pumpkin, bell peppers, and I do utilize all of these foods. Also, organ meats will have some vitamin E as well. So you do have to pay attention to getting that vitamin E level into that healthy range, which is going to be between 1.4 to 28.6 international units per 100 kilocalories of food that you feed for your dog. Okay, now the other thing that you need to know about the fat-soluble vitamins is that for them to be able to be absorbed, they actually do need to be eaten with some saturated fat in the diet. So these safflower oils and the wheat germ oil and the cod liver oil, those are not saturated fats. So they will not be carrying those vitamins very well into the system. Your dog will need to have some saturated fat. So if you're using, like, let's say, an 85% ground beef, the other 15% is fat, 85% lean ground beef, they are going to have plenty of saturated fat in that. If you're not using a meat source that's going to have very much fat, then you're going to need to add some, either butter or coconut oil. Those are both good sources of saturated fat that you can feed to your dog. You want to do about equal parts unsaturated and saturated. So if you're giving a quarter teaspoon of Carlson's oil and a quarter teaspoon of wheat germ oil, then you can do a half a teaspoon of butter or half a teaspoon of coconut oil. Or if you're using a fattier meat, then you won't need to worry about that at all. You actually don't want to get too much fat in the diet, of course. For some dogs, they'll be more sensitive to that. Organ meats will also have some saturated fat. Heart muscle meat is going to have some fat around it. It depends on how well it's been cleaned off when it's been processed to how much fat that's there. So if you see that there's fat in the organ meats, of course, liver contains some fat as well. Any of your organ meats typically have a little bit of fat in them. Beef has higher fat, of course, than most white fish, although some fish is pretty high in fat, like salmon. But mostly that's going to be unsaturated fat, so you may need to actually include a bit of butter. And man, it makes everything taste better too. It's like butter, baby. Who doesn't love butter? Okay, so that is your lesson on fat-soluble vitamins. I hope that you've enjoyed this nutrition lesson from your host, Dr. Jessica Fusch, myself, and I look forward to chatting with you next week. Thank you so much for listening to the Biohack Your Pets podcast. This is your host, Dr. Jessica Fusch. I have a few favors to ask. If you're loving it, please go ahead and give us a 5-star review and share it with a friend. Share it with a pet parent who loves their pets just as much as you do. They will appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.